In the heart of New York's corporate glitter, one fearless mother's covert mission unearths a dark secret that will shatter illusions and ignite a revolution. Dare you witness the truth that could change everything? Angela Brooks had always believed that true power lay hidden beneath the surface, in the unseen details and quiet actions that defined a person's character. In the bustling heart of New York City, amid the ceaseless hum of ambition and the glitter of skyscrapers, the headquarters of Bright Horizons Inc. stood as a beacon of corporate success. Yet behind its pristine glass facade and meticulously crafted public image, Angela suspected that a deeper, more complex story was unfolding, one that would shake the very foundations of everything she held dear. It was on a brisk autumn morning, when the city's pulse seemed to quicken with the promise of change, that Angela stepped into the imposing lobby of Bright Horizons Inc. in a way that no one could have anticipated. Clad in a humble cleaner's uniform that concealed the formidable determination beneath, she crossed the threshold with a quiet resolve. Her eyes, which had witnessed decades of life's joys and sorrows, burned with an intensity that belied her unassuming appearance. For Angela, the decision to go undercover was not an impulsive act of rebellion, but a calculated, heartfelt mission to unmask the truths lurking behind corporate politeness and glossy annual reports. Bright Horizons Inc., dealing with its sterling reputation and illustrious history, was widely admired for its commitment to excellence and ethical business practices. Yet in the hushed corridors and behind closed doors, Angela had heard whispers of betrayal, of favoritism allowed to flourish under the guise of tradition. As she wandered through the marble-floored halls, her every step resonated with both purpose and a heavy sorrow for the ideals that were being compromised. It was as if the building itself, with its cold, reflective surfaces, held secrets too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Angela's heart pounded with a mix of apprehension and determination as she observed the daily rituals of the office. Employees in sharply tailored suits hurried past, their polished shoes echoing against the stone floor, while meticulously arranged meeting rooms and sleek conference halls bore witness to countless decisions that shaped the company's future. Yet Angela's discerning gaze saw more than just the hustle and bustle of corporate life. She saw the subtleties, the dismissive gestures, the furtive glances exchanged in the silence of a hurried conversation, and the undercurrents of entitlement that betrayed the company's lofty claims of unity and respect. Her mission was clear: to peel back the layers of pretense and expose the chasm between the company's public declarations and its everyday reality. Angela had spent years nurturing the values of integrity, compassion, and accountability, values that had been the bedrock of her own journey through life. Now, with her identity concealed beneath the guise of a mere cleaner, she was determined to confront the stark contradictions that threatened the moral fabric of Bright Horizons Inc. Every corner of the sprawling headquarters held clues, and Angela was meticulous in her observations. In the soft hum of the break room, she listened as colleagues shared laughter and whispered confidences, their camaraderie a fragile veneer over an environment of hidden rivalries. In the quiet of the administrative wing, she noted the respectful nods and genuine smiles exchanged by some, only to be overshadowed by the cold indifference of others. The disparity was palpable, a silent testimony to a culture that had gradually drifted away from the values it once espoused. Angela's mind wandered to memories of her own early days, a time when respect was not measured by a title or wealth, but by a person's willingness to extend kindness and integrity even when no one was watching. That lesson, learned through hardships and moments of quiet resilience, now propelled her to seek a reckoning at Bright Horizons Inc. She longed to restore a sense of honor that had been eroded by years of unchecked ambition and corporate complacency. As the day unfolded, Angela moved through the building with an air of quiet vigilance. In the administrative offices, she observed Teresa Martin, a gentle and composed employee whose eyes revealed both weariness and a spark of hope. Teresa's interactions were laced with genuine care and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the dismissive attitudes Angela had witnessed elsewhere. The warmth in Teresa's smile, even amid the relentless pace of deadlines and meetings, was a reminder that not all was lost. There were still souls within this vast corporate machine who believed in the dignity of every role, no matter how seemingly insignificant. Yet as Angela continued her covert journey, the darker truths began to reveal themselves. In a secluded corridor, she overheard a conversation that sent a chill down her spine, a discussion between a group of mid-level managers whose casual cruelty was masked by an air of superiority. They spoke in hushed tones about a junior employee's minor mistake as though it were a moral failing, laughing at the notion that such an error could be forgiven. The callousness in their voices was a betrayal of everything Bright Horizons Inc. purported to stand for, and in that moment, Angela felt the weight of her mission intensify. She realized that the company's celebrated image was built on a foundation that was slowly crumbling under the pressure of unethical practices and hidden prejudices. In the quiet moments that followed, as she returned to the service area for a brief respite, Angela's thoughts churned with a turbulent blend of sorrow and resolve. Each instance of disrespect, every act of unmerited cruelty, was a stitch in a tapestry of moral decay that threatened to engulf the very soul of the institution. The glittering facade of success could no longer hide the deep-seated fissures that ran through its core. Angela's heart ached at the thought of all those who had suffered in silence, whose voices had been drowned out by the relentless pursuit of profit and power. Her internal struggle was punctuated by fleeting encounters with individuals whose lives exemplified the best of human spirit. In a brief, quiet exchange by a supply closet, Angela met Jonathan Lee, a maintenance worker whose soft-spoken nature and unwavering dedication had kept the company's inner workings running smoothly for over a decade. Jonathan's gentle recounting of his own daily struggles, of feeling invisible yet indispensable, resonated deeply with her. His story was one of quiet heroism, a reminder that integrity often lay in the simplest acts of commitment, performed without expectation of recognition. Later that afternoon, as the late autumn sun cast long shadows across the gleaming floors of the headquarters, Angela found herself in the company's modern cafeteria, a vibrant microcosm of Bright Horizons Inc.'s diverse workforce. Here, amidst the clatter of trays and the murmur of casual conversations, she observed the stark contrasts in human behavior. Groups of employees huddled together in animated discussions, their faces lit with camaraderie and shared purpose. Yet in one corner, a young woman sat alone, her eyes downcast as she nursed a cold cup of coffee. The loneliness was palpable, a silent cry for validation in a place where every mistake was magnified and every misstep recorded. It was in these unguarded moments that Angela sensed the true pulse of the company. The facade of corporate efficiency, so carefully constructed, was riddled with the invisible scars of isolation, neglect, and suppressed voices. In every interaction, in every fleeting glance, there lay a story of triumph and struggle, a mosaic of human experiences that had been reduced to mere numbers on a balance sheet. Angela's resolve hardened. She was not there merely to observe, but to ignite a transformation that would restore the humanity that had been lost in the pursuit of success. The early hours of the day were a delicate balancing act between quiet observation and the internal storm of emotions that threatened to burst forth. Angela was acutely aware of the risk she was taking, not only to expose the hidden corruption within the company, but also to confront the painful realities of a system that had allowed its soul to be compromised. Every step she took was imbued with the weight of responsibility, every breath a silent promise to those who had been marginalized and mistreated. By the time the day began to draw to a close, Angela had amassed a silent record of the contradictions that define Bright Horizons, Inc. The brilliant shine of polished surfaces and the meticulous order of boardroom presentations now stood in stark opposition to the subtle, insidious decay that festered beneath. She recalled the furtive smirks of those who dismissed a colleague's error as an inconvenience, the cold indifference of managers who believed that compassion was a luxury no longer afforded in the ruthless world of business. It was a reality that filled her with both despair and a fierce determination to catalyze change. In the quiet solitude of her modest apartment that night, as the cacophony of New York City softened into a distant hum, Angela sat by her window and allowed herself a moment of introspection. The skyline, a glittering testament to human ingenuity, stood as a silent witness to her inner resolve. She replayed the day's events in her mind, the smiles of genuine kindness, the whispered alliances of solidarity, and the stark, unyielding cruelty of those who had forgotten what it meant to be human. Each memory was a reminder of the stakes at hand, the future of a company that had once been a symbol of ethical excellence and the very real lives of the people who worked within its walls. Angela knew that her journey was only beginning. The revelations she had gathered were not just evidence of misdeeds, they were a call to action, a plea for the restoration of values that had long been eroded by the relentless pursuit of success at any cost. The challenge ahead was immense, and the path to transformation would be fraught with obstacles. Yet, in the depths of her soul, Angela believed that every system could be redeemed if its people were willing to confront the uncomfortable truths and embrace the possibility of change. There was a magnetic pull in the air, a sense of impending transformation that promised to shake the foundations of Bright Horizons, Inc. The silent rebellion that had taken root in the hearts of the company's unsung heroes was waiting for its moment to bloom, and Angela Brooks was determined to be the catalyst. Her undercover mission was not merely an experiment in corporate accountability, it was a profound journey into the heart of what it meant to lead with integrity, to stand up for those who had been silenced by the machinery of ambition. In that moment of quiet reflection, Angela vowed that she would not rest until the true spirit of compassion, respect, and accountability was restored within the hallowed halls of Bright Horizons, Inc. She recognized that the road ahead would be arduous and fraught with challenges, but the spark of hope that burned within her was brighter than any darkness. The story that was unfolding was one of human resilience and the timeless struggle to reclaim dignity in the face of overwhelming odds. A story that would resonate with anyone who had ever felt marginalized or silenced by an unjust system. Thus, with the quiet determination of a woman who had weathered the storms of life and emerged stronger for it, Angela Brooks set forth on a mission that would forever change not only a corporation, but the very meaning of leadership itself. The legacy of Bright Horizons, Inc., once shrouded in the glitter of superficial success, was about to be rewritten by a force born of genuine empathy, unwavering courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice. And as the night deepened over New York City, the glittering lights of the metropolis seemed to wink in silent acknowledgement of the transformation that was on the horizon, a transformation that began with a single act of courage, a single voice that refused to be silenced. In the stillness of that moment, the promise of a new dawn was palpable, and the story of Angela Brooks, of Bright Horizons, Inc., and of the many souls whose lives would be touched by her unwavering resolve was only just beginning. The journey ahead was one that would test the limits of human endurance, challenge long-held beliefs, and ultimately redefine what it meant to be truly successful. It was a call to awaken the dormant spirit of accountability, to shatter the illusions of perfection, and to embrace a future where every person's worth was measured not by their position or wealth, but by the strength of their character. And so, with the echo of her silent promise reverberating through the corridors of her heart, Angela Brooks embarked on her undercover mission, a mission that would not only expose the hidden truths of a corporate giant, but also illuminate the path to a brighter, more compassionate tomorrow. Angela Brooks's undercover mission began in the quiet early light of a new day in New York City, when the world outside Bright Horizons Inc. was still waking up to its own possibilities. Determined to uncover the hidden realities beneath the corporate veneer, she stepped into the grand lobby once more, this time not as the woman the world revered, but as a humble cleaner, blending seamlessly into the background. With every measured step on the cool marble floors, Angela felt the weight of her mission, one that sought to expose the subtle fractures in a system built on polished appearances and lofty promises. The corridors of Bright Horizons Inc. were more than just passageways connecting offices. They were silent witnesses to a myriad of human interactions that often spoke louder than any official report. Angela's days in her new guise were devoted to immersing herself in these moments. As she moved about the expansive building, her senses were constantly alert to the nuances of conversation, the exchange of glances, and the smallest gestures that could reveal the true nature of the company's culture. In the gentle rustle of paper in a busy administrative area or the quiet murmur of voices in a break room, she began to piece together the intricate mosaic of behaviors that define the organization from within. In one particularly striking instance, Angela found herself in a long corridor adjacent to a series of glass-enclosed offices. The atmosphere was deceptively calm, the polished surfaces reflecting not only the physical light, but also the carefully curated image of corporate perfection. Yet, as she paused to rest her eyes, she observed a group of mid-level managers gathered in a small conference room. Their conversation, though cloaked in the guise of routine business, carried an undercurrent of entitlement and disregard that contradicted the company's outward claims of fairness and respect. The dismissive tone with which they discussed a minor error made by a junior employee was a stark reminder that beneath the facade of professionalism, there were deep-seated attitudes that devalued the contributions of those considered lower in rank. Angela's covert existence allowed her to move unobtrusively among the employees, each encounter adding layers to her growing understanding of the company's internal dynamics. In the administrative wing, she encountered Teresa Martin, a soft-spoken yet remarkably composed woman who managed the scheduling office with an air of quiet dignity. Teresa's interactions were imbued with genuine warmth. Her polite nods and kind smiles provided a counterpoint to the harsher, more self-serving behaviors exhibited elsewhere. Observing Teresa, Angela felt a stirring of hope that the true values of compassion and mutual respect still lived among some of the company's most dedicated workers. Yet, the deeper Angela delved into her daily routine, the more she realized that the disparities were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger, systemic issue. In the central cafeteria, a space designed for communal breaks and casual conversation, the duality of human nature was laid bare. Here, the hum of friendly chatter and laughter mingled with undercurrents of isolation and quiet resignation. Angela noted how groups of employees congregated in clusters, sharing not only meals but also a sense of camaraderie that transcended office hierarchies. At the same time, she observed individuals sitting alone, their expressions reflective of a deeper sense of disconnection, a silent testimony to the emotional toll that an environment of unspoken judgment and competitive pressure could exact. Her role as a cleaner offered a unique vantage point. While she was ostensibly engaged in the mundane tasks of sweeping floors and tidying up meeting rooms, Angela was also an attentive observer of the human condition in its most unguarded moments. The routine was punctuated by brief yet powerful interactions. A hurried conversation between two colleagues at the water cooler, the exchange of a sympathetic glance between an overworked employee and a supportive friend, and the palpable tension that occasionally filled the air when a minor mistake was met with an unexpectedly harsh rebuke. Every gesture, every nuance, contributed to a broader narrative of a company struggling to reconcile its public image with its private realities. In one instance, while diligently dusting the surfaces of a seldom used hallway, Angela's ears caught snippets of a conversation that would leave a lasting imprint on her conscience. A pair of mid-level managers were discussing an incident involving a young intern who had made a small error in data entry. Their words, laced with casual cruelty, dismissed the intern's mistake as a reflection of incompetence rather than an opportunity for learning. The callous laughter that followed was not just a momentary lapse in judgment, it was a window into a culture that prioritized personal convenience over nurturing growth. For Angela, this was a clear sign that the ethical foundations of Bright Horizons Inc. were deeply eroded, hidden behind layers of corporate protocol and polished presentations. Throughout the day, Angela's careful scrutiny revealed more than mere isolated behaviors. It uncovered patterns of conduct that painted a broader picture of an institution in distress. The contrast between the outwardly pleasant demeanors of support staff and the cold, calculated indifference of certain managerial figures was stark. In the soft-spoken interactions of dedicated employees like Teresa Martin and the gentle, almost imperceptible frustrations of longtime staff, Angela detected the heartbeat of a workforce yearning for recognition and respect. Conversely, the dismissive attitudes of those in positions of authority, who seemed to view every human error as a personal affront rather than an opportunity for improvement, underscored a troubling imbalance in power dynamics. The interplay of these observations began to crystallize in Angela's mind as she moved from one part of the building to another. In the administrative offices, where the pace of work was relentless, she noted how the relentless pressure of deadlines had seemingly driven a wedge between genuine collaboration and a competitive survival of the fittest mentality. In the break areas, where moments of respite were meant to rejuvenate, she saw evidence of isolation, colleagues absorbed in their own struggles, unwilling or unable to bridge the gaps created by an unspoken hierarchy of worth. Angela's resolve deepened with every passing hour. Each encounter, each whispered conversation served as both a revelation and a call to action. She knew that her mission was not simply to document these discrepancies, but to use her observations as the foundation for a transformative reckoning, a reckoning that would force Bright Horizons Inc. to confront the reality that its soul was at stake. Her heart ached for the employees who bore the brunt of an uncaring system, and it burned with a fierce determination to bring their voices into the light. Despite the inherent risks of her undercover operation, Angela moved with a quiet confidence born of conviction. Her disguise, though unremarkable in appearance, was a shield that allowed her to witness the unvarnished truths of corporate life. Every moment in that vast, labyrinthine structure contributed to a growing compendium of experiences, a tapestry of human emotions that range from hope and resilience to frustration and quiet despair. As she navigated the labyrinth of hallways, offices, and communal spaces, she became acutely aware that the story of Bright Horizons Inc. was not just about fiscal success or innovative breakthroughs. It was a deeply human story, woven from the threads of everyday lives, each struggling to be seen and heard in an environment that often prized appearances over authenticity. In the reflective solitude of her post-shift moments, Angela would often revisit the scenes of the day. Sitting in the modest break room reserved for the cleaning crew, she would close her eyes and let the images and voices of the day replay in her mind. The laughter that had been tinged with bitterness, the quick exchanges of sympathy, and the cold dismissals of error all converged into a powerful narrative, a narrative that spoke of a company at a crossroads between maintaining its glittering public facade and embracing the raw, unfiltered realities of its inner life. There was an undeniable poignancy in these reflections. For Angela, Every observed injustice was a call to uphold the principles of dignity and fairness that had guided her throughout her life. The challenge was not merely to expose wrongdoing, but to offer a pathway toward genuine reform, a path illuminated by the quiet heroism of those who, despite the oppressive weight of an indifferent hierarchy, continued to believe in the inherent worth of every individual. She knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, that the struggle to realign the company's values with its actions would be long and arduous. Yet in the face of systemic indifference, Angela's heart was resolute. She embraced her role as both an observer and an agent of change, confident that even in the smallest acts of acknowledgement and kindness, there existed the seeds of a broader, transformative revolution. By the time the day's final light faded from the towering windows of Bright Horizons, Inc., Angela had not only witnessed the interplay of corporate ambition and human vulnerability, but had also internalized the profound responsibility that came with her mission. In the quiet dark of the night, with the distant hum of New York City as her only companion, she prepared to compile the silent testimony of her experiences, a compendium that would serve as both evidence and a beacon of hope for the change she so passionately believed was possible. In those solitary moments, as she looked out over the city that never slept, Angela's thoughts turned to the countless voices that had gone unheard amid the clamor of boardroom decisions and corporate triumphs. Her undercover journey was more than a personal crusade. It was a mission to reclaim the human soul of an institution that had lost its way. The mosaic of experiences she had gathered, each piece a reflection of struggle, resilience, or quiet defiance, spoke of an urgent need for renewal, a transformation that could only be achieved when truth was allowed to surface from beneath layers of carefully constructed illusions. Angela Brooks, standing at the threshold of a monumental challenge, was determined to be the catalyst for that transformation. With every whispered secret and every unguarded moment captured during her day, she was building a case not just for accountability, but for a rebirth of values, a return to a time when every employee's worth was measured by their humanity, not their position in a hierarchical structure. The quiet revolution that was beginning within the corridors of Bright Horizons, Inc. was a promise of a future where integrity, empathy, and respect would form the foundation of every decision. Thus, as Angela quietly closed the door behind her at the end of another long day, she carried with her not only the burdens of the injustices she had witnessed, but also a deep, unyielding hope that the truth, once fully revealed, could ignite the change necessary to restore honor to a company that had long forgotten its own soul. Angela Brooks's journey of observation, once confined to silent, solitary hours, finally culminated in revelations that struck with the force of an unbridled storm. Over weeks of covert vigilance, she had quietly collected a tapestry of unsettling truths, a mosaic of unethical decisions, covert prejudices, and silent complicities that, when woven together, revealed the deep fissures undermining the very soul of Bright Horizons, Inc. Now, with her carefully amassed evidence in her heart and mind, the moment of reckoning had arrived. A moment that would force the company's true nature into the glaring light of accountability. It was a day unlike any other when the polished corridors of the headquarters suddenly vibrated with the raw energy of suppressed emotions. The morning had started quietly, as usual, with Angela diligently attending to her duties, blending seamlessly among the unsuspecting employees. But as the hours unfolded, the subtle dissonances she had noted began to crescendo into a chorus of distress and discontent. In a secluded section near the executive offices, Angela stumbled upon a conversation that sent a chill through her soul. Two high-ranking managers, voices low and urgent, debated the allocation of company funds. Their discussion, initially hushed and methodical, soon escalated into an impassioned dispute filled with terms that spoke of personal greed and blatant disregard for ethical boundaries. Words such as embezzlement and skimming profits were muttered under the weight of unspoken truths, and the implications were clear. Those entrusted with leadership were not merely failing to uphold integrity, they were actively exploiting it for personal gain. In that critical moment, Angela felt the full gravity of what she had been destined to uncover. The reality before her was not a series of isolated missteps or unfortunate misunderstandings, but a pattern of calculated malfeasance. Each misdirected dollar, each cold dismissal of responsibility was a thread in the tapestry of corruption that had long been woven into the fabric of Bright Horizons, Inc. The revelation hit her with a profound sorrow, a deep, aching realization that the ideals upon which the company was built had been systematically undermined by those who prioritized self-interest over collective well-being. Emboldened by the urgency of the truth, Angela pressed on with renewed determination, her every movement now carrying the weight of responsibility to those who had suffered in silence. Her undercover role had granted her a unique vantage point, a privileged view into the unguarded moments when the veneer of professionalism slipped, revealing raw human emotions. In one such instance, she witnessed a junior employee, barely more than a newcomer, being harshly reprimanded by a supervisor whose voice was devoid of any semblance of compassion. The employee, trembling and disheartened, could scarcely meet the eyes of his accuser, a man who, in his unchecked arrogance, seemed to relish the display of power. This public humiliation was not merely a disciplinary measure, it was an assertion of dominance, a clear signal that any deviation from the unwritten code of elitism would be met with relentless cruelty. That moment ignited a fire within Angela. The injustice she had witnessed was a microcosm of a much larger systemic failure, a failure to nurture talent, to support growth, and to value human dignity. The company's lofty mission statements and public declarations of commitment to excellence had been rendered hollow by the day-to-day realities of exploitation and neglect. The stark contrast between the polished public image and the hidden atrocities of everyday interactions was too great to ignore. Angela's heart swelled with a mixture of anger and compassion as she committed every detail to memory, knowing that these revelations were the catalysts for the transformative confrontation she had long envisioned. The tipping point came during a company-wide meeting that had been convened to discuss performance metrics and strategic initiatives. The boardroom, typically a domain of carefully measured rhetoric and rehearsed optimism, was charged with an undercurrent of tension that belied its tranquil appearance. Angela had found her way to the back of the room once again, blending into the sea of executives and managers, her presence unnoticed yet her mind keenly attuned to every spoken word and every furtive glance. It was here that the accumulated weight of her discoveries reached a boiling point. The air was thick with anticipation and anxiety as long-suppressed frustrations began to bubble to the surface. As the meeting unfolded, a respected longtime employee, Samuel Carter, whose quiet integrity had long made him a silent pillar in the midst of corporate excess, rose to speak. In a voice that trembled with a potent mix of indignation and vulnerability, he questioned the foundation upon which Bright Horizons, Inc. had been built. His words, though softly spoken, cut through the stale atmosphere of conformity like a clarion call for truth. How can we celebrate excellence when the very principles that define it have been compromised? He asked, his gaze sweeping across the room, searching for allies among the disillusioned faces. His question was met with a murmur of agreement from many, while a few hardened expressions betrayed a deep-seated resistance to change. It was in that charged moment that Angela's own resolve crystallized. No longer could she remain a silent observer. The repository of evidence and the pain of every slight, every act of injustice demanded a voice that would not be stifled by the conventions of corporate hierarchy. With a deep, steadying breath, she rose from her seat at the back of the room. The sudden movement drew startled looks, and as all eyes turned toward her, time seemed to slow down. In that suspended instant, the full force of her identity and her purpose surged forth. There, in front of a sea of stunned colleagues and senior executives, Angela Brooks revealed herself not merely as a humble cleaner, but as a guardian of the company's lost values. A woman who had seen too much to allow the silent suffering to continue unchallenged. Her voice, calm yet resolute, filled the room as she recounted the series of revelations she had painstakingly gathered. She spoke of the covert misappropriations, the callous treatment of employees, and the pervasive culture of indifference that had allowed unethical practices to flourish. With each detail she revealed, the atmosphere shifted from one of disbelief to one of palpable outrage. The evidence she presented was not based on conjecture, but on a series of meticulously observed events, a mosaic of moments that, when seen together, painted an undeniable picture of corruption and moral decay. The confrontation was more than a mere outburst. It was an emotional catharsis that resonated deeply with those present. The room erupted in a tumult of voices, some filled with anger and indignation, others with tears of relief as long-hidden grievances found their voice. Angela's words broke down the carefully constructed walls of complacency, exposing the raw vulnerability of a system that had long been sustained by silence and fear. Her revelations, delivered with an intensity born of personal conviction, forced every individual in that room to confront their own complicity in maintaining a status quo that had become intolerable. In the wake of her courageous stand, the response was swift and multifaceted. Several employees, emboldened by her honesty, stepped forward to share their own experiences, stories of being marginalized, humiliated, or ignored by a system that prized power over empathy. Among them was Brianna, a young staff member who had suffered a particularly harsh rebuke early in her career. With trembling determination, she recounted how a senior supervisor had publicly berated her over a trivial mistake, leaving her shaken and isolated. Her testimony, delivered in a voice that blended pain with newfound resolve, underscored the emotional toll that an unyielding, hierarchical culture could inflict on even the most capable individuals. For some, the shock of Angela's revelations was a jolt that shattered long-held illusions. The very foundations of trust that had sustained Bright Horizons Inc. were suddenly called into question, and the atmosphere of deference that had long silenced dissent began to crumble. Even those who had once been complicit in maintaining the facade found themselves grappling with a deep sense of shame and regret. The boardroom, once a theater of polished rhetoric, transformed into a crucible for truth, a place where the past was laid bare and the path to redemption became fraught with difficult choices. Angela's confrontation was not solely an act of exposing wrongdoing. It was an impassioned plea for transformation. She spoke of the inherent worth of every individual, of the urgent need to restore the principles of compassion, accountability, and genuine respect. Her words were both a denunciation of the rampant corruption that had infiltrated the corridors of power and an inspiring call to action. A call for every employee, from the lowest ranking custodian to the highest executive, to reclaim their dignity and rebuild the company on a foundation of integrity. As the meeting drew to a close, the emotional reverberations of Angela's revelations lingered in the charged silence that followed. The confrontation had irrevocably altered the landscape of Bright Horizons Inc., setting in motion a process of introspection and, ultimately, change. The undeniable truth that had been brought to light could no longer be dismissed or hidden behind polished smiles and strategic press releases. It had become a rallying cry for those who believed that true success could only be achieved when it was underpinned by moral clarity and genuine human connection. In the days that followed, the impact of that momentous confrontation rippled throughout the organization. Conversations in break rooms, hallways, and private offices took on a new tone, one of cautious optimism intertwined with a lingering sense of disillusionment. Employees began to question the practices that had long been accepted as the norm, and many found themselves re-examining their own roles within a system that had suddenly been stripped of its pretenses. The revelations sparked a series of impromptu meetings and quiet discussions among colleagues who, until that day, had felt powerless in the face of systemic injustice. For Angela, the emotional confrontation was a turning point that redefined the trajectory of her mission. No longer was she merely an undercover observer, she had become the embodiment of a call for accountability, a voice that refused to be silenced by the machinery of corporate ambition. Her courage had unleashed a torrent of emotions, a wave of resistance that promised to reshape not only the culture of Bright Horizons, Inc., but also the broader narrative of what it meant to lead with integrity. In that charged atmosphere of shared revelation and collective yearning for change, the seeds of transformation were sown. Angela's unwavering stand, fueled by both personal pain and the hope for a more compassionate future, had set the stage for a journey that would force the company to confront its darkest corners and, perhaps, emerge reborn. As she stood there, in the aftermath of a confrontation that had shaken the very foundations of a once proud institution, Angela Brooks knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. Yet the fire she had ignited in the hearts of those around her burned bright, a beacon of hope and an enduring reminder that the pursuit of truth and justice was a cause worth every sacrifice. Thus, with the echoes of her impassioned speech reverberating in every corner of the room, the stage was set for a new chapter in the life of Bright Horizons, Inc. A chapter defined by the promise of accountability, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative power of standing up for what is right. The revelations had shattered the illusion of perfection, exposing a vulnerability that could, in turn, become the catalyst for genuine renewal. And as the final words of that fateful meeting faded into the stillness of the aftermath, the future of the company and the lives of its many inhabitants hung in a delicate balance, a balance that would soon be tipped by the relentless pursuit of a more just and compassionate tomorrow. In the wake of Angela Brooks's earth-shattering revelations, the atmosphere at Bright Horizons, Inc. shifted dramatically, as if a long-held secret had suddenly been exposed to the harsh light of day. The boardroom, once a fortress of polished rhetoric and impeccable decorum, transformed into a crucible of truth and retribution. Angela's courageous stand had not only shattered the carefully maintained facade of corporate perfection, but had also set in motion a series of events that would redefine the very fabric of the company. The shock of her disclosures rippled rapidly through every echelon of the organization. Within hours of her impassioned speech, murmurs of disbelief and indignation reverberated through the corridors. Senior executives who had prided themselves on their control and expertise were forced to confront the damning evidence of ethical breaches and abusive behavior that Angela had meticulously gathered. It was a moment when the veneer of invulnerability cracked, revealing the vulnerability and moral decay hidden beneath. Marcus Brooks, the young CEO and Angela's own son, found himself at the heart of this storm. Late into the night, in the quiet isolation of his office overlooking the city's glittering sky in Iowa, he pored over the documents and first-hand accounts that Angela had presented. His eyes, usually brimming with confident determination, were now clouded with a mixture of sorrow, regret, and a fierce resolve to set things right. He knew that the legacy of Bright Horizons, Inc., a legacy built on the pillars of integrity and excellence, was at risk of being tarnished beyond repair. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders as he grappled with the realization that the very culture he had inherited was in urgent need of transformation. The board, galvanized by Angela's unwavering conviction, swiftly convened an emergency meeting. In a room filled with anxious whispers and furtive glances, the leaders of Bright Horizons Inc. were forced to reckon with the gravity of the situation. Angela's evidence was irrefutable, and it painted a damning picture of systemic neglect, exploitation, and a pervasive lack of accountability. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that no one could remain silent any longer. The time for placating excuses or sweeping issues under the rug had passed. The board unanimously decided that a radical course of action was required, a course that would not only address the immediate misconduct, but also pave the way for a comprehensive cultural reset. With measured resolve, the board announced a series of immediate terminations. High-ranking managers whose actions had not only breached ethical codes but had also actively contributed to the erosion of trust were summarily dismissed. Names like Darren Simmons, who had presided over instances of public humiliation and blatant abuse of power, were spoken with a mix of shock and relief. For many employees, the news of these firings was a cathartic release, a long-awaited acknowledgement that their suffering had not gone unnoticed. The sudden departures sent shockwaves through the corridors, where previously unchallenged authority now lay in tatters. For Angela, the decision was bittersweet. Though she had always known that exposing the truth would come at a personal cost, watching the powerful fall was a moment of vindication tempered by the sorrow for what had been lost. She understood that the firings were not a panacea. They were the first step in a long, arduous journey toward rebuilding a fractured institution. Yet in that decisive moment, the board's action signaled a clear commitment to restoring the principles of fairness, accountability, and respect, values that had been all but forgotten in the relentless pursuit of profit. As word of the firing spread throughout Bright Horizons Inc., the company's internal landscape began to shift. In the days that followed, the hallways, once dominated by an air of quiet resignation and guarded silence, started to buzz with tentative hope. Employees, many of whom had long felt marginalized and undervalued, began to speak more freely about their experiences. In hushed conversations during coffee breaks and whispered exchanges in the corridors, there emerged a new, fragile optimism, a belief that change was not only possible, but imminent. Marcus Brooks took decisive action to rebuild the company's reputation. Recognizing that the damage extended far beyond the individuals who had been fired, he launched a comprehensive internal audit aimed at uncovering any further discrepancies and establishing a foundation for long-term reform. New protocols were introduced, emphasizing transparency and accountability at every level of the organization. Open-door policies replaced closed-door meetings, and employees were encouraged to voice their concerns without fear of retribution. This radical shift in governance was accompanied by a series of workshops and training sessions designed to recalibrate the company's moral compass. The aim was not merely to cleanse the organization of corrupt practices, but to foster an environment where every employee, regardless of rank, felt a sense of belonging and empowerment. Public reaction to the dramatic turn of events was swift and unequivocal. News outlets across New York City, and indeed the nation, picked up the story, heralding Angela Brooks's actions as a watershed moment in corporate accountability. Opinion pieces lauded the firm's bold step toward self-reckoning, and social media erupted with discussions about the need for ethical reform in business. The story of a determined mother exposing the dark underbelly of a prestigious corporation resonated deeply with a public tired of corporate greed and complacency. For many, it was a beacon of hope, a reminder that no matter how entrenched power might be, it could be challenged by a single act of moral courage. Yet, amid the euphoria and the promise of reform, there was an undercurrent of apprehension. The immediate fallout left many wondering about the long-term implications of such a dramatic overhaul. For those who had been loyal to the old order, the abrupt change was disorienting, a stark departure from the status quo. There was a palpable tension in the air, as employees tried to reconcile their memories of a once stable hierarchy with the new reality of an organization in the throes of radical transformation. The fired managers, once revered figures of authority, were now cautionary tales, their names etched into the company's history as symbols of the perils of unchecked power. In the midst of this upheaval, Angela remained a steadfast figure, a symbol of unwavering integrity and resolute determination. Her role in the unfolding events transcended that of a mere whistleblower. She had become the moral compass of Bright Horizons, Inc. Despite the personal toll and the myriad challenges that lay ahead, Angela's conviction never wavered. She understood that the process of rebuilding trust would be gradual and fraught with setbacks, but she also believed in the transformative power of truth. Every fired employee, every dismissed act of misconduct was a step toward a more just and compassionate future. The days following the firings were marked by intense introspection within the company. In town hall meetings and informal gatherings, employees from all levels expressed both relief and a cautious optimism. They spoke of the need to create a workplace where respect was not just a corporate slogan, but a living, breathing reality. The internal audit, conducted with a newfound commitment to impartiality, revealed that while the fired managers were the most glaring symbols of corruption, there were many others whose behaviors had contributed to a toxic environment. This realization led to a broader discussion about systemic change, a conversation that extended far beyond individual culpability to the very ethos of Bright Horizons, Inc. Marcus, drawing on the raw emotion of the past few days, embarked on a series of heartfelt dialogues with his employees. In these sessions, he acknowledged the deep-seated pain and disillusionment that had permeated the company and vowed to rebuild trust from the ground up. His words, imbued with sincerity and an earnest desire for renewal, struck a chord with many. Employees began to see him not just as a distant figurehead, but as a leader genuinely committed to righting the wrongs of the past. This shift in leadership style, from aloof authority to empathetic stewardship, was a crucial element in the nascent process of cultural transformation. For Angela, the path forward was illuminated by both the tangible changes in the company's operations and the intangible, yet profound, shift in the collective spirit of the workforce. In the quiet moments following the storm of firings, she observed how the renewed sense of accountability sparked small acts of courage and kindness. Long suppressed grievances were now being discussed openly, and a new dialogue about respect and fairness was taking root. It was as though the company was beginning to shed the layers of cynicism and complacency that had long weighed it down. The transformation, however, was not without its challenges. The process of healing required more than just structural changes. It demanded a fundamental reawakening of values. In the weeks that followed, Angela and Marcus worked tirelessly to implement initiatives that would cement this new era of transparency and accountability. They introduced mentorship programs, established clear channels for reporting misconduct, and set up regular forums where employees could share their experiences and suggestions. These measures, though still in their infancy, signaled a decisive break from the past, a commitment to nurturing a workplace where every individual felt valued and heard. As the dust settled and the immediate crisis began to recede, the legacy of that tumultuous day continued to reverberate throughout Bright Horizons, Inc. The firings, while painful and disruptive, had served as a catalyst for a long overdue reckoning. The company's journey toward redemption was just beginning, and the road ahead was uncertain. Yet, in that uncertainty lay the promise of renewal, a chance to rebuild not only an organization, but also the very trust and dignity of the people within it. For Angela Brooks, the personal cost of her actions was immense, yet it was a price she was willing to pay for the sake of truth. Her unwavering commitment to exposing injustice had not only toppled corrupt figures, but had also ignited a spark of hope that could transform an entire institution. In her eyes, every fired manager, every exposed act of malfeasance, was a step toward reclaiming the values that once defined Bright Horizons, Inc. And as the company embarked on this arduous journey of self-reinvention, Angela's role as a guardian of integrity shone as a beacon for all those who believed that true leadership was measured not by power or profit, but by the courage to do what is right. In the echo of boardroom debates, in the hushed discussions of weary employees, and in the quiet resolve of a company determined to heal, the immediate repercussions of Angela's revelations took root. Bright Horizons, Inc. was no longer the same institution it had once been. It had been irrevocably altered by a single, unyielding act of moral courage. The firing decision, though harsh, was a necessary purge, a painful yet vital cleansing that set the stage for a future defined by transparency, accountability, and above all, human dignity. Thus, as the first light of a new day broke over the towering skyline of New York City, the foundations of Bright Horizons, Inc. trembled with the promise of renewal. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope, a hope that the company and the people within it could rediscover the values that had once made it a beacon of excellence. In the aftermath of the revelations and the sweeping firings, a new chapter was beginning, one where every act of integrity, every moment of compassion would contribute to the rebirth of an institution that had been awakened by the relentless pursuit of truth and justice. In the months following the tumultuous upheaval at Bright Horizons, Inc., a profound transformation began to take shape, a transformation that would forever redefine the company's identity and leave an indelible mark on every individual who had been part of its journey. The aftermath of Angela Brooks's courageous revelations and the sweeping firings reverberated throughout the organization like a clarion call for renewal, prompting a deep introspection among leaders and employees alike. Slowly but unmistakably, the culture that had once been mired in silence and complacency started to shift toward one characterized by openness, accountability, and an unwavering commitment to ethical principles. Marcus Brooks, now at the helm of the company, recognized that the damage inflicted by years of neglect extended far beyond the actions of a few corrupt managers. He understood that a genuine, sustainable transformation required more than just structural changes. It demanded a complete reawakening of the organization's soul. With resolute determination, he initiated a series of strategic reforms designed to rebuild trust from the ground up. He introduced a comprehensive internal audit that not only scrutinized past practices, but also set a new standard for transparency and fairness. Every process was re-examined through the lens of integrity, and new policies were crafted to ensure that every voice within Bright Horizons, Inc. was heard and valued. Under Marcus's leadership, town hall meetings replaced closed-door discussions. In these open forums, employees from all levels were encouraged to share their experiences and suggestions without fear of reprisal. The atmosphere in these gatherings was both candid and cathartic, as individuals who had once felt powerless now spoke with a clarity and conviction that breathed new life into the company. Slowly, the seeds of reform began to take root. New mentorship programs were established to support career growth and foster a culture of continuous learning, while open-door policies ensured that concerns could be raised and addressed promptly. The emphasis was no longer solely on financial success or market dominance, but on nurturing a community where every individual's contributions were recognized and celebrated. The transformation extended far beyond internal policies. Publicly, Bright Horizons, Inc. embarked on a campaign to restore its reputation. one built on the renewed commitment to accountability and ethical leadership. Marcus and Angela worked together to share their vision for a reformed organization. They appeared at industry conferences and participated in panel discussions where they candidly recounted the company's recent trials, the painful decisions that had been made, and the lessons that had been learned along the way. Their frank discussions resonated deeply with business leaders and the general public, sparking widespread conversations about the importance of integrity in corporate governance. The media, once critical of the company's past practices, now heralded its transformation as a beacon of hope in an era marked by corporate scandals and unchecked greed. For many of the company's employees, the transformation was deeply personal. The painful memories of humiliation and neglect were gradually replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. Brianna, who had once been the silent victim of public beratement, emerged as a symbol of resilience and growth. With the support of new mentorship initiatives and the genuine care of her colleagues, she flourished into a confident leader. Her journey from a marginalized employee to an empowered voice within the organization became a powerful testament to the transformative impact of a supportive and transparent workplace. Stories like Brianna's were not isolated. They were echoed in the quiet triumphs of countless individuals who rediscovered their worth and potential in the wake of systemic change. Jonathan Lee, the long-serving maintenance worker whose quiet dedication had always been the backbone of the company's day-to-day operations, experienced his own renaissance. No longer relegated to the background, his contributions were formally acknowledged through awards and public recognition. His story, a reminder that every role holds inherent value, reinforced the new ethos that Bright Horizons Inc. sought to embody. The company's commitment to nurturing every facet of its workforce gradually fostered a climate where respect was not a mere platitude, but a lived reality. Yet the path to transformation was not without its challenges. The process of healing required confronting painful truths and making difficult decisions that would inevitably stir residual tensions. Some employees, steeped in the old ways of conformity and guarded authority, resisted the change. The transition was marked by moments of uncertainty as individuals struggled to reconcile their past experiences with the new, unburdened culture that was emerging. However, the leadership's consistent emphasis on empathy and collective progress gradually quelled these anxieties. Over time, even the most skeptical voices began to acknowledge that the company's rebirth was not a fleeting trend, but a fundamental reorientation toward values that truly mattered. Angela Brooks, whose journey from undercover observer to moral beacon had set this transformative process in motion, continued to serve as the guiding force behind the company's reformation. Though her role had evolved from secret crusader to celebrated advocate of ethical leadership, her commitment to the principles that had spurred her initial mission never wavered. She made frequent appearances in employee forums, sharing not only the details of her past experiences, but also her unwavering belief in the power of truth and accountability. Her impassioned speeches and thoughtful reflections became a rallying point for those determined to rebuild a workplace rooted in fairness, empathy, and mutual respect. Angela's personal narrative, etched with the struggles of a long-fought battle for dignity, became a touchstone for a broader movement that extended beyond the confines of Bright Horizons Inc. The impact of these transformative efforts began to ripple outward, influencing not just the internal dynamics of the company, but also the broader business community. Other organizations, inspired by the bold steps taken by Bright Horizons Inc., started to reevaluate their own practices. Industry leaders took note of the tangible benefits that arose from fostering an environment where ethical conduct was prioritized over short-term gains. Conferences and seminars buzzed with discussions on the importance of creating a culture where every employee felt valued. a conversation that, until recently, had been relegated to the margins of corporate discourse. In this way, the story of Bright Horizons, Inc. transcended its immediate context, offering a powerful model for how systemic change could be achieved even in the most entrenched of institutions. As the seasons changed and the city of New York continued its relentless rhythm, Bright Horizons, Inc. gradually emerged from the crucible of its own self-examination. The scars of the past, though still visible in moments of reflection, began to fade as new traditions and practices took root. The transformation was both profound and enduring, a rebirth that was measured not by financial metrics alone, but by the renewed spirit of collaboration, integrity, and respect that now defined the company. Employees who had once felt isolated now worked together with a shared sense of purpose, their collective efforts forging a future that honored both the lessons of the past and the promise of a more inclusive, compassionate workplace. In this new era, every success story was a reminder that true progress comes from acknowledging and learning from one's mistakes. The legacy of the painful events that had forced Bright Horizons, Inc. to confront its shortcomings was reinterpreted as a necessary catalyst for growth. The company's journey, marked by the courageous actions of Marcus and Angela Brooks, had illuminated a path forward, a path where accountability and ethical leadership were not optional but essential ingredients for long-term success. As the organization continued to evolve, it embraced a philosophy that celebrated the resilience of its people and the transformative power of collective action. Looking back, the tumultuous period of reckoning had become a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. The lessons learned at Bright Horizons, Inc. were not confined to the boardroom or the corridors of a single corporate headquarters. They resonated with anyone who had ever dared to challenge injustice or to stand up for what was right. The story of transformation at Bright Horizons, Inc. was one of painful truths, hard-won victories, and an unyielding commitment to building a future where every individual's worth was recognized and nurtured. It was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, the pursuit of truth and justice could spark a revolution of hope and renewal. As the company continued its slow but steady march toward a brighter future, the lasting lessons of that transformative period remained etched in the hearts of all who had been part of its journey. The call for transparency, empathy, and ethical accountability echoed not just within the walls of Bright Horizons, Inc., but across the entire business community. In the end, the legacy of the transformation was measured not by the number of firings or policy changes, but by the profound positive impact it had on the lives of countless individuals, an impact that would endure for generations to come. In the quiet moments of reflection that followed, Marcus Brooks often recalled the tumultuous days that had reshaped his company. He understood that true leadership required not only the courage to make difficult decisions, but also the humility to learn from past mistakes. Every initiative, every new policy, and every open conversation was a step toward restoring the trust that had once been the hallmark of Bright Horizons, Inc. The company, now reborn, stood as a living testament to the idea that even the deepest wounds could heal when nurtured by a culture of compassion and accountability. Thus, the journey of Bright Horizons, Inc., from the depths of corruption to the heights of renewed integrity, became a beacon of hope and an enduring lesson in the power of transformation. Angela Brooks's legacy, interwoven with the spirit of those who dared to dream of a better tomorrow, served as a constant reminder that no matter how dark the past might be, the future could always be rewritten by the courage to act with truth and compassion. In this new chapter, every day was a celebration of human resilience and the unyielding pursuit of a more just and equitable world. A future where every individual could thrive, not because of their rank or status, but because they were valued simply for being human. Angela Brooks's journey, From her initial covert mission at Bright Horizons, Inc., to the transformative upheaval that reshaped an entire corporate culture, is a testament to the power of integrity, resilience, and the unwavering commitment to doing what is right, even when it comes at a great personal cost. In a world where corporate facades often mask deep-seated issues, Angela's courage in exposing unethical practices and standing up for the oppressed has not only illuminated the hidden truths behind a polished veneer, but also sparked a movement toward transparency and accountability. Over the course of her undercover mission, Angela entered the hallowed halls of Bright Horizons, Inc., disguised as a humble cleaner. This bold decision was not driven by a desire for personal recognition, but by a deep-rooted need to understand the real dynamics at play behind the company's success. As she navigated through the sleek corridors of a world-renowned corporate headquarters in New York City, Angela observed the subtle yet significant interactions between colleagues. She noted the genuine warmth of support among some employees and, in stark contrast, the callous indifference and even cruelty from those in power. Each observation, every whispered conversation and furtive glance painted a picture of an institution that had long lost its way, a company that celebrated success on paper while silently allowing injustice and exploitation to flourish. Angela's careful documentation of unethical behaviors, ranging from the mishandling of company funds to the public humiliation of vulnerable employees, served as the catalyst for a seismic shift in the organization. When the time came for confrontation, her revelations exploded into the open during a tense boardroom meeting. There, in front of shocked executives and a sea of silent witnesses, Angela cast aside her disguise to reveal the painful truths she had uncovered. The ensuing emotional confrontation was both cathartic and transformative. It not only forced the leadership to acknowledge decades of moral decay, but also empowered many of the company's employees, who had long suffered in silence, to find their voice. The immediate repercussions were profound. High-ranking managers who had epitomized the company's failure in ethical leadership were summarily dismissed, sending a clear message that no one was above accountability. Marcus Brooks, the young CEO and Angela's son, grappled with the heavy burden of responsibility as he worked to mend the fractured culture of Bright Horizons, Inc. Under his leadership, sweeping reforms were introduced, ranging from comprehensive internal audits to open-door policies and mentorship programs. These initiatives aim to restore trust and create an environment where every employee felt valued, heard, and respected. As the days turned into months, the transformation at Bright Horizons, Inc. began to ripple outwards. What had once been a bastion of corporate elitism gradually evolved into a community grounded in transparency, empathy, and mutual support. Employees like Brianna, who had been the silent victims of public beratement, rose to become empowered leaders within the organization, symbolizing the potential for personal growth and redemption even in the harshest environments. Jonathan Lee, a long-serving maintenance worker, finally received the recognition he had long deserved, reminding everyone that every role in an organization is vital. At its core, Angela's story is not just about exposing wrongdoing. It is a profound narrative about the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of accountability. Her journey reminds us that true leadership is not measured by one's title or wealth, but by the courage to act in accordance with one's principles, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It demonstrates that when individuals come together to demand transparency and fairness, even the most entrenched systems can be reformed. The deep lesson that emerges from Angela Brooks's courageous quest is that every one of us has the power to initiate change. In our daily lives, whether in the workplace or in our personal relationships, we often encounter situations where ethical lines are blurred or where injustice goes unnoticed. Angela's example teaches us that by standing up for what is right, By speaking out against wrongs, supporting those who are marginalized, and refusing to allow indifference to prevail, we can create ripples of change that extend far beyond our immediate surroundings. It is a call to embrace our responsibility, not only as individuals, but as members of a larger community, to nurture environments where integrity and compassion are valued above all else. To apply these lessons in our current lives, we must first look within ourselves and assess where we can make a difference. Perhaps it means offering a kind word to a coworker who feels isolated or challenging a decision that compromises fairness. It might involve advocating for policies that promote transparency in our organizations or simply leading by example in our daily interactions. Angela's story is a reminder that even small, seemingly inconsequential actions, when performed with conviction, can spark a chain reaction leading to profound systemic change. Whether you are in a leadership role or simply a member of a community, the power to influence and inspire positive change lies within you. As you reflect on Angela's journey, from the hidden corridors of corporate power to the triumphant call for ethical reform, consider how her unwavering commitment to truth and justice can serve as a guiding light in your own life. Let her story inspire you to act with integrity, to challenge the status quo, and to believe in the possibility of a better, more compassionate world. Each one of us holds the potential to be a catalyst for transformation, and together, we can build a future where every individual's worth is recognized and where every voice is heard. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of discovery, resilience, and transformation. If you found Angela's story inspiring, and if you believe in the power of accountability and ethical leadership, please subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you are not only supporting us but also becoming part of a community that values integrity, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Your support motivates us to continue sharing stories that matter and to bring you content that not only informs but also inspires action. Join us as we explore more stories of courage and transformation, stories that remind us all that change begins with a single courageous step. Subscribe now, and together, let's build a future where every act of honesty and every gesture of kindness creates a ripple effect of hope and renewal.